Sekeres Price for Friday, February 9th, 2024, coming to you from the Go-Goat Sports Studio, built by Arbor Lee here at the iconic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. If you're looking for a getaway this Valentine's Day or extend a game night, call the Wall, 604-331-1000. Ask for the Sekeres Price rate. Some blackout dates may apply. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price. Grady Sass hitting switches, conducting things. We got a big show, and it's all brought to you by Applewood Auto Group.
Applewood Nissan in Richmond. That's in the Richmond Auto Mall. So easy to get to, so easy to park and find. Of course, the Rogue and Cash Guys, two cornerstones of the Nissan lineup. The Rogue can get a 24-month lease on the 23s with 0% on select trims, and on the Cash Guy, 36-month leases with 2.99% on all the trims for the 2023s. Go see them now. It's all good at Applewood.
Poll question today: did the loss to the Bruins reveal anything that concerns you? You can vote yes or no. Sekeres Price on Twitter and YouTube. And if you are voting yes, please specify. Get in the comments. Let us know exactly what concerns you. I ask you first, Blake Price. There's anything from last night?
Yeah, the power kill, the penalty play, whatever that's called.
Shorties in three straight
Shorties aplenty. We saw this to some degree in the opposite direction. Remember the version of the Canucks that were giving up like power play goals every single time to the opposition? Like it was the penalty kill gave up goals in, like 6 of 9 opportunities over like a 3-game stretch. And it's a snowball running downhill. It becomes just like we can't do this. We will surrender. It kind of feels like that. I mean, with the numbers this grave here over the last 6 games, like it just feels like the power play goes out there and you're just as worried about giving up the goal as you are excited about getting one.
I agree it's too pronounced. I agree it's too lasting. 3 straight games here, they've surrendered a shorty to open things up.
But really, the last 2 or 3 weeks of it have been bad.
But I voted no on the poll because that should be an easy fix.
You would think.
Like, I'm racking my brains for the playoff series that was decided by one team's dangerous shorthanded unit, right?
But they to me, they
are backbreakers. You know,
they're the fumbles, they're the interceptions, if you will.
Sure, but
of hockey.
They're rare enough that I don't perceive them as a huge problem. This team is also the only NHL team that has not lost 3 straight games. So really, I'm not going to get too overly amped or concerned about one loss, even if it was to Boston, even if it was by a 4-0 scoreline. Ooh,
yeah,
that brings back memories. So let's get to our top story. Then it is the 4-0 loss to Boston, the most lopsided loss of the season. Statistically, the Vancouver Canucks have not lost a game by 4 goals until Thursday night in Beantown. It's the second shutout loss. They were shut out in Philadelphia early in the year in October. And, well, Rick Tocchet not happy, but as you'll hear in these clips that we play, not happy, but still measured and calculating in choosing his words. We'll start with the no-show here in what was a big game, a marquee game of the 2 best teams in the West and the East.
Yeah, I mean, it's a teaching moment. It's a big game. A lot of eyes were on us tonight. They didn't play well their last game. Their coach kind of called them out, they showed up, and we just made some stupid mistakes. Yeah, you're in big games. You got to make sure that you don't make mistakes, and you have to have effort. I thought some guys played well. I mean, I thought some guys tried and played, but unfortunately, we had half the guys they weren't there.
Half the guys.
Several things stand out there. Number one, John Shannon mentioned to us Wednesday, watch out in Boston. Their head coach tore a strip off them.
There's another team involved.
Dreadful loss against Calgary coming out of the break. He's mentioned eyes on the team several times in the last few weeks. I do wonder whether his time in television has sort of is seeping in there when he talks about, I believe in advance of the Leafs game, he talked about, a lot of eyes on us. So I do wonder whether, Rick feels like his team's got to perform for the larger hockey world when they're in these games.
I think it's proving themselves what he's talking about.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair.
And I don't know.
Also, I think there's a little bit of, let's show the rest of the world what we got here. And that wasn't us last night.
And this is going to come out throughout the course of the day, and it's going to come out, folks, in your conversations amongst your friends. Oh, Canucks in the big game. And they failed that test. But Carolina has been on a tear. They went into Carolina, won a tough playoff kind of game. They've gone into MSG and won games this year, beaten Florida a couple of times, beaten Dallas. Like, they've you look at the top of the stand, those are all top 10 teams in the National Hockey League. So, yeah, that's a loud loss. And they've had a couple of other loud losses this season. Vegas, I'm thinking, as well, where they just were never in it.
Colorado.
But they've also passed these tests throughout the season as well.
So, look, and I have the list here. There are two ways you can go about it. If you believe Vegas, Colorado, and Boston are in a different tier than the rest of the top 10 teams, and I think there's a case.
There's a case.
That's the last two Stanley Cup champions.
Yeah.
That's a team that had an extraordinary 135-point regular season last year, albeit, they have lost some players from that team, and is leading the East. So if you believe Boston, Vegas, and Colorado are in a different tier, and you're well within your right to think so, you can draw the line after those three, then it's a concern. But as you note, Blake, it's 2 wins against Dallas. It's 2 wins against Florida. It's 2 wins against Carolina. It's a win and an overtime loss to the Rangers when the Rangers got away with a blatant penalty in overtime that led to the game-winning goal.
Beat Tampa 4-1.
And it's a win and a loss against the Leafs. So the three teams, Vegas, Colorado, Boston, record not good. Versus the next 4, 5, that's still pretty scintillating stuff.
And the Stanley Cup winner could
lost
very
one
well
game and lost one in overtime. And 8 wins. So 8-1-1 against that next tier.
Yeah, and how shocked would you be if the Stanley Cup winner, the eventual, came out of that list that you just talked about at the end there?
Oh, I mean, I think it's all but certain.
Like, it's that wouldn't be shocking. So
I guess Edmonton and Tampa would be the ones from below the top.
But again,
10
they've beaten Tampa already this year, and they're 3-0 versus the Oilers. So right. I mean, there's a lot of evidence that shows that the Canucks can beat good teams. There's a lot of that evidence. But you're right. The elite, the very tip of the iceberg, it's been a little bit tougher.
Yeah, 3-0 against the Oilers. They got a win and a loss against Tampa Bay. So, look, sky is not falling. Nobody here is going Chicken Little over a 4-0 loss to Boston, even if it was against Boston, and by that same scoreline that, of course, brings back the evil memory.
And we're going to hear more
from the Stanley Cup Final 2011.
We're going to hear more from Rick Tocchet in a second, but it was a funny diatribe, and in that he really only had negative things to say about his team last night, and yet several times he kind of did shake his head and come to a little bit and be like, I know it's our first loss in 13 games. It's a weird position that he's in to look at a game like that, as bad as it was, but knowing that they haven't had a regulation loss in 3 weeks.
They had points in 14 straight.
Yeah.
Here's coach, and this is really running a narrow channel here. He's calling out his top players without calling out his top players. Take a listen.
We need a couple guys here. Let's go. I mean, come on. They weren't good tonight, some guys, and they haven't been good, frankly, last. These are big time games. Marchand and Pasternak, great players, and they showed up. We got to have that kind of thing. Now, listen, there's our first loss in, I don't know how many games, 13, 14, so I can't get too critical, but these are big games. You'd like to see a little bit better from some guys, and those two the shorthand goals really is something you cannot do in big critical games. You just can't.
So he doesn't name names, and 2 points there. 3 by name checking Marchand and Pasternak. He's effectively getting everybody just to draw the straight line across. Number 2, he didn't need to name names because of his actions. Pettersson at one point in this game is sitting more than Pettersson normally sits. The power play 1 does not start a power play, which, say no more, coach. We know what you're trying to say there. JT Miller's had some culpability last night on the goals against, and his ice time was not exactly overflowing either. And then thirdly, Blake, and this is the one that we were talking about, Elias is a sensitive soul. He called him by name recently, and we all sat there and wondered, with what's going on in the back channels on the contract negotiation or the lack of negotiation and the desire to get him signed so you can move forward with your franchise and roster building, probably wise that he didn't name drop Pettersson.
Oh, totally. And Pettersson knows. And, I think he was effectively saying in that last one, best players have to be the best players, because he name checked the Boston best player. So you're right. It's all right there. But, I think it was a master class by talking in a lot of ways. The good coaches know when to get angry at their team. And it wasn't even getting angry. You know what? This is, something for a guy like Tortorella to look at. You can be angry at your team without ranting and raving and frothing at the mouth. I think everybody got the point that he was none too pleased by the effort last night. But he still sounds like he's calm, cool, and collected, Rick Tocchet. So, kudos to him for that. And he gets the message across, I think, both to players and to media and fans, that he sees what you see, and those players know what they need to do to be better. Masterclass.
The more I listen to him, the more he moves up my power rankings.
Yeah, I think so too.
Coach communicators.
Yep.
He is absolutely A+ on this facet of the job. I mean, he's as good as some of the best I've ever heard in terms of
no
the way they
sugarcoating, and yet no frothing at the mouth either.
Well, but
finding that
gets the message across, has his own distinct style, uses terminology that is also, if not unique, but trademark. Also understands he's communicating to his dressing room and to a fan base at large. A lot of guys don't ever get that, Blake, and he gets it. As for the shorthanded goals, allowed in 3 straight, 2 last night. Here's Coach on how they have to be better in that facet.
We talked about our pre-scout power play meeting. They go for it. You have to defend. That means you have to defend. You can't go for escape.
And I think, that they actually specifically are now watching video on other teams' penalty kill and how aggressive they are getting with Vancouver. Probably tells you something, right? That he's at wit's end with that. And something the players are going to have to learn between now and the playoffs. Again, should be an easy fix. I don't think anyone's pulling hair out about shorthanded goals in the middle of what is an incredible season. And frankly, if you're going to have a blip in this regard, let it be a game 50-51, not a game 81-82.
Well, the funny thing is that the Carolina game, to me, I was like, wow, this penalty kill is amazing. It is a complete antidote to the Canucks. To the point, they were all over the points. And, they couldn't get JT Miller going downhill. Hughes was under pressure nonstop, and yet they still execute because of the fine tips of Lindholm in front. But I thought the pressure that they had, which is kind of old school, like lately everybody's
very
been
old school.
They've been collapsing, and just saying shoot away. These active pushes to the blue line, to me,
but Blake,
causing a lot of issues.
You have the numerical advantage, so it should be easy to adapt and fix that.
Oh, I know, but it's just chess. That's all. Now they've made moves, and now you've got to find a way around those moves. So you got to figure it out. Now it's on Tocchet and his staff to figure that part out.
But if it's chess, you still have your queen. They don't have their queen.
Yeah.
Okay. You got to be able to go to plan B.
Sure.
And I think they've been sluggish to go to plan B. And frankly, the new guy coming in has probably further complicated that, right? Because you're worried about integrating the new guy. And he looked fantastic in game 1 with the 2 tip-in goals. I'm not worried in the least here. They're going to figure that out. You worried?
About the power play?
Yeah.
No, there's too much talent there. They'll figure it out.
Let me ask you this. Are you worried that Pettersson might be hurt? We got a text yesterday from somebody who knows skating strides who wondered about the shortness of Elias's stride right now and that he's compensating, wondered if there was some sort of groin problem. Now, he's not going to cop to it. In fact, he has shot down previous questions and speculation about injury.
Well, the route he took to Heinen was a bit odd. He kind of took it wide instead of going right at him.
Hockey players battle through things all the time.
I've previously worried about this.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't been on my radar recently, because I thought that he's just looked so good up till recently.
Mm-hmm.
His ice time has not suffered. He's still had lots of 20-minute games in the last couple of weeks. He had a 20-minute game versus the Carolina Hurricanes.
What did he finish last night?
14-17.
Yeah. That's
now I wondered when he was skipped over there when they put Lindholm with was it Lindholm with Mikheyev and Höglander. I thought, okay, because then they immediately came out with Suter and Miller and Besser. They skipped over him.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, did he just ask to be skipped over? Did he want to let something rest, or was that a coach's decision? If I don't want you out there right now, I don't know. But that was a peculiar spot in the middle of the contest where he just got skipped over, and you don't generally skip over Elias Pettersson.
Mechanically, he's
not
the cleanest skater.
No, he never has
an
been.
awkward stride to him.
And
but
not the fastest.
No, but he thinks the game so well that he can make up for it in other areas. Kind of like what we saw with Sedins, but that's a little different in its own right.
Mikheyev has gone 19 without a goal.
I think it's time for a change there.
Yeah.
I think Nils Höglander is the most obvious option. You could break up the third line, but you know what? As much as they may not be producing at the same rate, they're still having great games. The third line is.
First period in Carolina, they're the best line on the ice.
Right. So, like, I still think those are third line guys. Like, I love Connor Garland's chutzpah, but I still think he's a third line guy. And I'd like to see what Nils Höglander could do with that group. Puck retrieval on the boards.
Yep.
That's one thing Mikheyev doesn't do. Mikheyev's not really been digging lately. I don't know. I don't know what to say.
Just the goals not being there, but the effort and the details being there, it would be one thing.
Yeah.
But he's just not very noticeable at all.
Well, it's like the third line. The third line does not have a bottom line super recently, but you can see what's happening. And I can't see what's happening with Mikheyev.
And we saw that the third line did not have a bottom line early in the season, but knew they were playing well. And sure enough, the bottom line came.
Yeah.
And I would not be at all surprised if that's the case again for Blueger, Joshua, and Connor Garland.
I mean, you could do a little bit of a flip-flop and go Höglander all the way to the top with Miller and Besser and drop Suter.
Yep, you could do that
too. But Höglander into the top 6 is probably ready.
Yeah.
YouTube, Nucks for Life 11, Hogs with Petey and Lindy. The all Swedish line.
Yeah. That's I have got no problem with that at all. I think that could work.
Detroit and Washington on the weekend. Both of the morning starts.
For us, yes.
For us.
By the way, weekend early starts, big fan.
Absolutely love them.
Early starts on
especially
weekdays,
after football season too.
Yeah. Weekday early starts, not a fan.
Direct conflict with my kids' games. This is problematic for me.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. I had to watch last night's game on my phone. I don't enjoy that.
Oh.
Yeah. So I'm going to have to do that again.
So hold on a second. Do you watch the Canucks instead of your kids?
No, the game went right up to the puck drop. Okay. It was like literally the horn sounded and then puck dropped.
Okay.
It was perfect.
When there's a direct conflict, you watch the Canucks game over your kids?
As soon as my girl goes over the boards onto the ice, I look at my kid. And as soon as they're off the ice, I look at the screen.
Very diplomatic answer, Senator Price.
You need one of those new VR headsets that could show you the game while you watch.
I don't need one of those VR headsets.
No.
Have you seen some of the?
Oh,
it's crap.
They're weird.
It's so bad. Matt'll be getting a VR headset.
Oh,
he's our tech guy.
Oh yeah, sure.
Oh no, I don't know. Want to know what he'll be watching on there.
I'm telling you, I'm prepared for the holodeck. When the holodeck becomes the thing at home,
I'm sure you'll figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
Honey, what did you do to the holodeck? Do you know how to turn the holodeck on? I can see it now.
I went to this NASA.
Call the holodeck. It's not working.
I do.
Give me the number for the internet.
I went to this NASA VR thing over the weekend. That was pretty cool.
You went to what?
Simulation in space on all these rocket ships.
You went to this?
Yes.
Where?
No, I went to the moon. Yeah. It was down by station. Main and terminal.
Huh. Wow.
Little industrial
I
area.
didn't know you were a space nerd.
Mom bought us tickets.
Oh, okay, Mom.
yeah,
Well
it was
done,
cool.
Mom. She's still hoping that you become an astronaut, Grady.
Her birthday yesterday. Shout out Donna.
There you go.
Detroit and Washington. Two teams that are right there on the cusp of the Eastern Conference playoff race. Although in the case of the Washington Capitals, no Kuznetsov. Things are getting a little bit late in the day for the Caps. 51 points. They trail the Red Wings, who are actually the last team in the East playoffs as we speak, at 58 points going into Friday's play.
And they've lost 6 in a row.
Yeah, Detroit's a plus 15 goal differential.
Yeah.
They in Pittsburgh sort of stand out amongst that group that's vying for Eastern Conference playoff spots. And of course, there's some upward mobility there in the Atlantic Division because the Leafs aren't too far out of reach of Detroit, Tampa. It's very, very tight.
They give up goals, though. They've got 161 goals allowed as well. So that's 30 more than the Canucks.
Yeah. Andrei Kuzmenko scores again for the Calgary Flames. So if you're keeping track at home, that's 2 goals for
5-on-5 goal, too.
2 goals for Andrei Kuzmenko.
He also had a classic Kuzmenko turnover at the blue line on the power play that ended in a goal.
The
Take the good, take the bad.
Flames
Yeah.
have won their 2 games coming out of the break against pretty good teams, too, in Boston and New Jersey. Chris Tanev leaves the game twice and returns both times. Can you imagine what's going through Craig Conroy's head?
Yes, we can.
As all that
because the
happens?
Canucks fans have been through this with assets down the stretch over the last decade going, I hope they trade so-and-so, and then so-and-so walks down the hallway, and you're thinking, no, they can't trade him.
Was it Hamhuis the 1 year?
Late, yes. Yeah. But there's been multiple examples of this where so-and-so gets injured, they can't trade him. Or so maybe so-and-so's injured. Maybe they can't trade him. And for the most part, Jim Benning's regime didn't trade anybody anyway. So not a lot of liquidation.
Why bother?
Not a lot of liquidation.
Remember that one deadline they traded Burroughs and Hansen, and people are like, yes, finally they get it.
Yeah.
Expansion draft purposes was part of the reasons why.
Yeah, they needed that kick in the butt.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're not going to relitigate.
Yeah. So you wonder whether that's scary enough for Craig Conroy and the Flames that now they get a set about trading Chris Tanev. We had heard after the Lindholm trade that a Tanev deal might be in short order. It was not. And yet, does Calgary look at it and say, we've won 2 in a row? We're 1 point out of a playoff spot. St. Louis has games in hand on them. So does LA. And they've won 3 in a row, 2 after the break. Do they feel like
3 in a row?
2 after the break, though, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
3 in a row total.
They're in that big group, and we'll talk more about this as days go by here. But there's a bunch of teams that are in, and I think the Preds are in this mode. The Philadelphia Flyers are in this mode. If we make it in, great, fun, yay. But we're still going to do what we need to do going forward.
Well, it's funny because I'm going to get to the Blues and the Predators here in a second. The reporting from the 4th period and beyond is that Vancouver, Toronto, and Dallas are in on Tanev.
Mm-hmm.
There's also this peculiar report about Rasmus Ristolainen being of interest for those teams, but there's contract term left there, 3 more years. It's a huge salary for a player who is underachieved. The Vegas Golden Knights had 3 people scouting the Calgary, New Jersey game. That's probably telltale. You know, I always laugh at this time of year when you see the list of teams that are scouting a game. Well, if a team only has 1 scout there, there's a pretty good bet that scout lives in the neighborhood and goes to a lot of those games.
Yeah, that
If
happens.
a team has a 2nd scout there, okay. Now we maybe cock an eyebrow. Team has 3 scouts in the building. That probably tells you they are looking at something specific. So, who might Vegas be looking at? You know they love the big defenseman, Noah Hanifin. Is Tanev amongst the Flames? And look, at trade deadline season now, because we're less than a month, we have you look deeply into a lot of things. St. Louis loses Justin Falk and Scott Perinovich for weeks. So 2 of their 6 defensemen are now out of the lineup for weeks. Perinovich hasn't really launched as a prospect, although people like him. Falk plays 22 minutes tonight. Is St. Louis really going to hang around? Or are they going to become sellers here with Kasperi Kapanen, Sammy Blais, Sundqvist, Scandella? They've got some other UFAs to be. Are they going to start liquidating? Tampa Bay loses Mikhail Sergachev, couple of broken bones in his leg. So do they now up what they're looking for on the defense market to replace a heavy minute guy? And then more reporting that the Edmonton Oilers, who were connected to Tanev early in the week by Darren Dreger, also looking at Philadelphia Sean Walker, but prioritizing a top 6 forward, maybe even Jake Gensel. Which, could you imagine Gensel on that team? Oh my God.
Every free agent winger or free agent to be winger ends up with the Oilers, it seems, at the end of every season. But what's also happening in sort of reaction to some needs arising for some contenders is you're hearing more and more names of, I think, teams at the bottom of the standings looking and going, okay, who on the defense do we really need here? Because we could sell off X, Y, and Z here. Like half of the Flyers defense corps is theoretically on the block here. Half of them. It's a team that's right now in a playoff spot. And you can acquire half of their defense corps? Like it's a weird year.
Well, half their defense is in a playoff spot, but here's the thing. They know there's a bigger game afoot in Philadelphia.
Yeah. Well,
that much is clear. They have not tried to fool anybody, including their fans, about competing for this year. That's not what the Philadelphia Flyers are about right now. The Philadelphia Flyers are about building something for the long term to be cup competitive, not just playoff competitive.
Teams are taking hard looks at themselves and going, we're really not going to win anything this year. So why don't we just, if there's going to be some good prices out there for defensemen in particular, why don't we take advantage? Like, I mean, you could probably half of the Predators defense squad. The Preds are what, 1 or 2 points out of the playoffs right now. Like you could get Fabro, Carrier, and Barry out of Nashville.
Mm-hmm. Walker, Sealer, Ristolainen in Philly, Hanifin, Tanev in Calgary, Dumba, D'Angelo, Peak and Boquist in Columbus. We've talked about Edmondson, John Merrill, Jacob Chychrun too. Like that's a bigger move, obviously, but the Senators have left side defensemen. They're looking for a comparable right side defenseman, and of course, that's a trade that comes with some term, and a little bit surprising his name is out there, but it is out there because it took so long for Arizona to trade him. But basically, Blake, here's what I'm saying. Like I'm looking at a list of 10 to 12 pretty decent defensemen who are on the block.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's flooding. And I think we're going to hear more names.
St. Louis, you've got some teams, Philly, who are really teetering on the edge of sell. I think this could be a buyer's market. Like there's part of me that wants Rutherford and Alvin to hold out to the last minute and then be predatory. Now, if a guy's got term, no one's going to cave at the last minute. And then there's guys like Carrier in Nashville, who Seravalli did a good piece on him, where he concluded that, look, if they don't get the right offer, they may just try and re-sign the guy because
he's 27.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there are some of these guys that the GM is looking to move and looking to recoup a future asset for. I sort of wonder, we've been talking about this for a week now, whether what appeared to be a seller's market not long ago is moving rapidly towards a buyer's market as teams evaluate where they are versus in the standings, but not just there, as you mentioned, evaluate, are we truly a contender? Like, can we win multiple rounds? And if not, is it time to make something?
Sometimes one can beget the other. I think teams look around and say, oh, there's good prices out there because it's a seller's market. But then if all the sellers come to the market, it becomes a buyer's market because it's too flooded. So I think we might see that sort of reaction where everybody sort of starts to float their defensemen out there because they think that there's a big market, and then there's too many guys out there, and all of a sudden, everybody's selling their bit player. So we'll see.
Well, and honestly, it looks like a bigger defense market than it does a forward market.
That's pretty funny.
Like, normally, I shouldn't say normally, there are some years where people are looking at, mid pair, if that mid to bottom pair defensemen, and talking themselves into second round picks for those guys because
defense has just become the it thing, particularly the right shot. So if you got a right shot defenseman, no matter how good they are, you're kind of dangling them out there to see what you might be able to get for them. So I think we're seeing that in spades around the league, and we'll see if people pull the trigger ultimately, see what the prices are.
Happy 3-year anniversary. Woo! Thank you to Jason Beck, the EBC Sports Hall of Fame, for the reminder tweet this morning about what happened 3 years ago today.
Good riddance.
Hope you had the time of your life.
From us to them, good riddance.
Yes. I can't recall the last time that I have seen political leaders come out as forcefully criticizing a major Canadian employer.
Yeah.
But here's where we're at with Bell Canada Enterprises and Bell Media specifically. Our Premier David Eby called them a corporate vampire after announcing 4,800 layoffs on Thursday, 9% of the workforce.
And then further along the political spectrum.
And then our Prime Minister, with Ontario Premier Doug Ford in the background.
Again, we're all across the political spectrum there. From Eby to Trudeau to Ford.
Yeah, that's a touch them all,
Touch
Joe.
them all, yeah.
Called it a garbage decision and said he was pissed off, and particularly noted local and community journalism in smaller communities that is just so necessary. I got to say, because one of the things that we heard when we got laid off and our station had its format changed was that there were a lot of Bell honchos that were surprised at the public backlash of it. Then fast forward to the Lisa LaFlamme termination and the story that seemingly went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, to the point where a rival media company immediately hired Lisa and threw her over in London to do reporting. And we were told, some of the Bell honchos were surprised that that story had the legs that it had. You think they're still surprised?
Yep. Yeah, they seem to be slow learners, Matt. So yeah, I'll say that.
You think they're in the bubble there in Montreal, the boardroom, going, "Oh my god,
people care about this sort of thing."
Hashtag Bell Let's Cut.
People keep citing Bell Let's Talk Day and somehow linking that with our layoffs. Why are they doing that?
Because it was a week later? Is that why? Honest to God.
Yeah. Anyways, more names have come out of people who have lost their employment with Bell and Bell Media since yesterday. Some of them locally, some of them at TSN National, some of them across the country. And hearts go out to you. We know what you're going through right now. Let's get to today's menu. It is brought to you by Seagram's VO Select Canadian Whiskey, originally introduced back in the early 1900s. Seagram's VO, designed as a wedding gift from Joseph E. Seagram for one of his sons. Barrel set aside in the warehouse, specifically marked VO, the family's very own whiskey. Joseph Seagram, you liked it so much, put it on the market. The rest is history here. Seagram's VO Select Canadian Whiskey, artfully blended, impeccably crafted. Make it your very own. We're going to talk to Frank Seravalli coming up here. Of course, trade deadline, so lots of topics to hit on, including the Canucks' interest in Phil Kessel, this Rasmus Ristolainen business. How quick are the Flames going to be in terms of trading Chris Tanev after the events of last night? He's a down the tunnel guy. Also, Frank predicting Nick Dowd, the former Canuck fourth line center, could fetch a first-round pick on this trade market. We have to ask him to explain that one. Tell us why. We'll get to some hashtags, the best and worst of Twitter, a couple of extraordinary performances in global athletics on Thursday, one of them from a Canadian phenom. To the people we go. On Fridays, we go to the people. Hear from you on a variety of Canucks topics over the last week. J-Pat's going to stop by, of course, after the loss in Boston with his full breakdown. And we'll talk some football as well. There's a big game on Sunday.
I didn't get a chance to put this into hashtags, and you don't have it either. Congrats to Nick Taylor on the 60 today at the Waste Management.
Yeah, finishing up his first round after the weather delay.
60. So
that's a heck of a.
He's in good shape going into the weekend or into the later Friday as well. Time for our best bets. A presentation.
Been a tough weekend weather, huh?
Well, yeah, the West Coast
54 whole event at Pebble, and
yeah.
Seth Tagala said he striped a driver yesterday that went 250 yards, then hit a 4-iron on the screws that was 20 yards short of the green. Those are the sorts of conditions they were facing yesterday.
British.
In normally, like, this is Phoenix.
Yeah.
Valley of the Sun.
Yeah, not much happens usually.
60. I think I've doubled that a couple times.
With us, in fact.
That's a good friend.
That's why you're no longer in the foursome.
Yeah.
I'm a content guy.
Not a contact guy, that's for sure.
No.
Best Bets, a presentation of Sports Interaction, your homegrown sportsbook and casino. Matt, what do you got, Matt?
We'll go more into detail later in the show, but I don't need the 2 points. I'm picking Kansas City straight up to win Super Bowl, paying at 2.10.
Sports Interaction does a great job of pointing forward on the NHL. So Canucks and Wings is up right now. Don't love the money line at 180 for the Canucks. Are they going to be able to do what Boston just did? Heed the criticism of their coach and turn it around?
I think so.
The Canucks
This is not a very good defensive team they're playing, as you say.
So if they can open it up here, the Canucks minus 1.5 is 285. Maybe run with that going into the Saturday morning contest. Sports Interaction, your homegrown sportsbook and casino, featuring custom props and parlays that you won't find anywhere else. And it speaks directly to the Vancouver sports fan. Plus a best-in-class casino with thousands of games. Scan the code there. Get 200% welcome bonus from Sekeres Price. Sports Interaction. Bet local. Must be 19 years of age. Please play responsibly.
I also like how Sunday it's a morning game before Super Bowl as opposed to.
Very polite.
You know, there have been years in the past where they've had to play like in Anaheim after Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I don't know. Play before Super Bowl. Seravalli's coming up next. Great Clips is the official hair salon of the National Hockey League. There are 37 salons in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, all Canadian-owned and operated. Download the app and find the nearest to you. When you're up next for a cut, you'll get a ready next text. Great Clips. It's going to be great.
My family's very own whiskey, barrel-aged and set apart, marked with VO, artfully blended, impeccably crafted, as a wedding gift to my son. For the bride and groom. And now, over a century later, from our very own family to yours, a legacy rooted in whiskey. Seagram's VO, growing deeper, reaching out, raising a glass to your legacy. Seagram's VO, make it your very own.
Hey, gang, if you're finding yourself a little directionless with a purpose on a game night, may I recommend Greta. It's a great spot to catch the game throughout the season. They're at 50 West Cordova, so you're on foot. You're just walking to and from the game. It's a lot of fun. It's a go-to spot for food, drink specials, and fun before and after the game. They do have specials every day. They've got all-day happy hour on Wednesdays, and they've got all those arcade games to keep you busy as well. So make it a fun game night at 50 West Cordova, Greta Bar and Grill. Visit them at gretabar.com.
Joined now by NHL insider from the Daily Faceoff and the Frankly Speaking podcast, Mr. Frank Seravalli. How we doing? How busy are you these days?
Oh, I'm busy. This is silly season where you're just chasing nonsense. Like you'd be shocked at how things sort of like even the most innocuous tip, like you get a call from someone who knows someone that's like, hey, Dustin Wolf from the Flames, he's flying to Newark today. He's on my friend's flight. So then like you need to quick hurry up and call people and you're like, are the Flames trading Markstrom? What's happening here? And then you find out that Dan Vladar just tweaked something and they're calling him up for insurance. And you're like, gee, thanks for the half-hour runaround.
Wow, we had the same thing this morning. Blake went, oh my God, Flames only have an e-bug on the ice. What's happening? Nothing, apparently.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And it's just a time suck sometimes.
Yeah.
But that's part of the deal. And you
That's
know
the
what?
gig.
And I would say too, you never know where stuff comes from. So I do not bat an eye at the weirdest source you've ever heard. People know stuff. And however it gets to you, it doesn't really matter. It just has to be correct.
I remember Blake and I were doing a show years ago in the summer, like an innocuous June or July day outside of BC Place. And we got a cryptic text in the inbox that just said, guys, I think Trevor Linden's being fired right now. Or has it just been fired? And sure enough, it turned out to be true, like within an hour or so. Okay, let's move on. Phil Kessel. Are the Canucks going to sign Phil Kessel, Frank?
I don't know. It's been a long time since Phil Kessel's played, and obviously he's remained training and kept hope alive. I think the big thing that's connected to it is the Rick Tocchet connection, right? He's the Phil Kessel whisperer and the person who really seemed to get him more than any other coach and get him engaged. I have real questions at this point how productive Phil Kessel could be. And it's not like we've got a pretty big sample size, right? You know, I know that he's hungry to play and the passion is there, but when you go a stretch where Vegas decides that for 20 games in the playoffs, their roster is better off without you in it, that I think to me, it's a real long shot, even if he does come in, for him to be a significant contributor.
Explain Rasmus Ristolainen to us. 3 more years at 5.1 million, and yet to listen to some, the Canucks, the Stars, and others are interested in Ristolainen, who
do not understand.
Consistently tracks as one of the worst defensemen by the analytics. But yeah, Dallas, Toronto, Vancouver, and Ristolainen. What's up there?
Does not compute. I think the Flyers would love to try and find a way to move on. I think he's enjoyed a bit of a renaissance under John Tortorella, but I think everyone understands that contract, as currently constituted, doesn't really make a lot of sense for the Flyers. How do they facilitate that? Can they find a way to reduce the salary to the point where it is palatable for other teams? There's opportunity cost involved if the Flyers were to do that. Like, think about the players that they're already retaining on in Kevin Hayes. That's already for 2 additional years. If you were to chew up another one for a couple years in Ristolainen, that doesn't leave you a ton of flexibility after the fact. That trade for Ristolainen will go down as one of the worst that we've seen in the last 10 years, getting him from Buffalo for Chuck Fletcher. It didn't make sense then. He didn't play well, and then they felt pot committed based on what that they had given up, that they felt like they had to re-sign this guy to a deal of that magnitude. And it does not make sense.
Where are the Flyers on any of these players? We've talked about Walker and Sealer and others. I mean, they played more games than anybody, and they're still 3 points back of that wild card spot. Although the wild card spot may not be the best, or they're 3 points back of the Hurricanes at the very least. When do they decide what their fate is this season, do you think?
Oh, they know what their fate is this season. If they get in, great. But John Tortorella gave everyone the warning shot 2 to 3 weeks ago. And he said, we're going to make some trades that people here aren't going to be happy with, meaning that they've played their butts off this year. And yet it's not really about this year. It's big picture. And this is a team that entered the season rebuilding. They've defied expectations and at times logic. Even the way this week has unfolded, you go into Florida right on the other side of the break where you sort of slid into it. The team goes on a bender in the Caribbean, and they come back and they beat the Panthers in Florida. Like, what? One of the best teams in the East. And then they shellacked the Jets last night. And you're like, well, how is this happening? But they've got the long view in mind. And I think it's very, very likely that they move Walker. Sealer he's kind of a wait and see. If they get something that really gets them excited, they'll move him, but they've continued contract extension talks, and it's been pretty positive there to the point where I think they're supposed to revisit it in 2 weeks and they're hoping to keep him. Mostly because what are you going to get for him that exceeds what he brings to the table for you? And so that's sort of where they're at up front. They're just entertaining lots of different stuff. Scott Lawton, whatever comes across their plate that makes sense is what they'll do.
What about Konechny?
Great question. I certainly don't think they're trying to move him. And I think if anything, what makes more sense to me is to wait until the summer when you can have, 15 other teams that are in the mix as opposed to just the contenders now. I think his value between now and the summer isn't going to change all that much. Yes, one additional playoff run would be nice, but I can't see cutting off half the market in order to try and pull the trigger now. It feels like one of those trades that if it happens, really needs to be sussed out and really go through a process to capitalize and maximize their return.
Moving from Calgary's crease to their blue line, Tanev leaves the game twice and returns. They win again, and I see Hanifin has risen to the top of your trade targets board. Did anything that has happened since the break? Where Calgary's been good with a couple of wins, including our buddy Kuzmenko. Is anything like that affecting Conroy? Does he think he's still in it? Does he get scared by what he saw from Tanev last night?
Well, those are a whole bunch of different questions. I'll start with Tanev. Your heart has to skip a beat. And I know that, he goes down the tunnel so often, it's pretty normal to see him return 30 seconds later. But the way he plays as a human missile, like I would think long and hard if I were in the Flames' shoes about asset protection at this point. Like, I think the last thing you want is to be left holding the bag. And I don't think the Flames are that far off from, obviously, just 2 run-ins in one game. You want to make sure you keep him clean to move him. And whether, that's now or whether it's 3 weeks from now, I don't think they're very far off from having to pull him from the lineup. When it comes to the team overall and their thought process, consider the pieces they've already taken off of this team, Zadorov and now Lindholm, and they're still competitive. Are things really going to change that much if they move Tanev?
Right.
Then the Hanifin part of this is until he puts pen to paper, he's going to remain the number 1 guy on our board. And I know they're waiting an answer. I believe they were supposed to meet either yesterday or today with Hanifin's representatives to really talk this through and to try and get an answer. But he's gotten cold feet. He's left them at the end of the aisle. You've given him everything he wants. It certainly feels to me right at this exact juncture that they would have to be thinking without an answer, we need to move him. But until that happens, he's going to stay there.
I, as you know, last week allowed you to bow on Sean Monahan. And so I preface this by saying, Frank, I trust you. When you tell me a centerman is going to go for a first-round pick, I'm buying you.
Okay.
Nick Dowd.
First-round pick. I'll
In
bet
what-
you.
in what way?
This might not be to my advantage.
Cast-off. The former Vancouver Canuck cast-off, who, to be fair, immediately started playing well in Washington as soon as he left here. Explain to me how he gets a first-round pick.
Term. It's the extra year on his deal at a nothing contract. And the reactions to people, when I said that on my podcast, they were, you could hear people's heads rolling almost. But there's been that much interest. Teams love him. And for a late first to get in, just think of the guys that Tampa traded for at the time that we were like a late first for Barkley. Like, that's the type of addition this guy is. And
he's 33. Like, I agree. Like, if he was 29, absolutely. He's 33.
He doesn't show any signs of slowing down to me. There's not a ton of wear on that tread. I don't know about you. Like, I sign me up with Nick Dowd. And look, I will do this. And you don't have to take me up on it, and it may not work to my advantage. Because of the differential in real estate between where I live and where you live. But I would bet you a mortgage payment that he gets a first.
Yeah, it is very different. Yeah. You don't want my mortgage payment. I assure you.
I bet Ryan Pinder on Barn Burner that Monahan would get a first. He didn't take the bet, but I made the same offer.
Yeah,
I'm a renter, Frank. You should see rents in this market.
I don't want to. Yeah. The only thing I would have going for me in that case is the currency conversion.
That's right. The conversion.
Is Tampa competition for a lot of these defensemen now that Sergachev's gone?
Yeah, I think they were in the market for depth defensemen anyway, but now with Sergachev, the injury has really thrown a wrench into their season, quite frankly. It's not just, we can get in, but can we compete? And how aggressive will we be? That remains to be seen. The thing from Julien Brisebois' playbook that we can draw on is the last few deadlines when he's been aggressive, which is every time, he's traded his firsts for players that he can retain, whether it's been Nick Paul or Brandon Hagel or Tanner Jeannot. Like, he's found a way to keep all those guys. And if he's going to go down that path again and be aggressive for a team that doesn't have very many assets, I'm skeptical that he will be, especially after the Sergachev injury, but defense is certainly the position to do it.
You talked about Alex Carrier today. Where does he land in this whole mix? Is he in a Sean Walker comparison in terms of the same kind of teams that are looking for him?
Yep. I think he's maybe a slight step down from Sean Walker, who I think has just a touch more size and better skating ability. But, to me, when talking about Carrier, he's the perfect kind of fit for Tampa that I could envision. Someone that you can improve your team without going over the top and spending crazy, and someone that if you wanted to bring back and re-sign, there's certainly a path for you to do so. And so I think he's one of those sneaky, quiet deadline additions that can really help a team that isn't going to break the bank. And there's not one facet of his game that's going to knock you over. He's not super skilled. He's not flashy. I said in the piece, there's not a lot of sizzle, but there's certainly substance. And he's someone that he shows up to work every night, which is more than you can say for a lot of guys.
From one typically aggressive team in Tampa, I want to spend a minute on Vegas. They had 3 different people scouting that Jersey-Calgary game last night. Do you think they'd be in on Tanev and Hanifin? Because the one thing McCrimmon has showed is they take the big swing.
Oh, yeah.
Typically. Are we going to see another big swing from Vegas here, Frank?
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they're in a window to win. Aiden Hill, look at his numbers since coming back, has been lights out. And I think when you look at their defense core, when Theodore's healthy, they've got some elite pieces, but they've also got some guys, further down their depth chart that are, some are replacement level and some are like an Alec Martinez, an unreal shot blocker, is long in the tooth. So there's room to improve and upgrade. I don't see a big fit up front, although you look at last year and the impact that someone like Barbashev had. Last year they didn't spend a first round pick. They didn't go wild to improve their team, but I could see them this year being that team that, dives in to support where they're at. I mean, look at the collision course that they're on. It's very likely to be Vegas and Edmonton in the first round. Not only will that be a bloodbath, but it's legitimately a coin flip.
Mm-hmm. And that brings me to something that we've started kicking around this week, Frank, and that is potentially an arms race here in the Pacific. That does Vancouver have to look at adding another guy, not just to improve their team, but to keep them away from Vegas or Edmonton, if we're talking about those 3 shopping in the same aisle here?
You mean deadline. In terms of keep them away in the bracket?
No, in terms of if Edmonton's hot to trot on Tanev, can you make a Tanev deal that not only helps your club, but of course keeps them away from an Edmonton or a Vegas?
Yeah, I mean, I always think that's a potential or part of it. I think that's also how you can lose yourself a bit, where you
sure, big risk.
you spend more time focusing on what other teams may be doing instead of what really helps your team. And not to say Tanev wouldn't. It's just that I've been saying, and I've been consistent for weeks now, yes, the forward component, huge. I love that the Canucks went out and got their guy. They got the guy that they wanted on the market. Now, when it comes to defense, I think they can use one more body, but I also don't know that I think a lot of these guys might be interchangeable, and it might not be the biggest splash that makes the most impact.
Well, it should be fun. I'm looking forward to this. Is the first time, Frank, we're talking about the Canucks being a buyer since 5 years in the Toffoli trade. And even then it was kind of
hope and prayer.
Yeah. First time we've seen this team, have a chance to add guys with a contender.
Fine tuning to contender is a different.
It's a totally different beast than let's get in and let's add a guy to hope to make sure we get in.
That's the most exciting part, though, is that has been Jim Rutherford's specialty. It hasn't necessarily been in turning things around, but they've done that.
Yeah.
But now he's had the golden touch on a number of teams now at the deadline to find that missing piece. And the other part that I love about him, and I've mentioned before, if it doesn't work, he moves on. And that is so big, admitting mistakes. He's good at it.
Yeah, the previous group, not so much.
Yeah. And well, on that vein, have you heard Mikheyev's name at all?
I have not.
Okay. Because he's not working out right now, but that may well be injury related coming back off the ACL. Great stuff, Frank. Thanks for this. We'll catch up next Friday.
Thanks, guys. Have a good weekend.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.